Well, hello there, and welcome to another tank review. I'm Corny Swiss, and today we're looking at the T-44, Russian Rank 4 medium tank. And as with all reviews, if you want to see something in particular, whether that's simulator or realistic gameplay, or maybe just the final opinion, the timestamps for those various portions of the review are down below, so feel free to click those and go off to whatever you want to watch. If you want to watch the garage portion, let's get started. So the T-44 that we have in the game is actually the T-44A. It's the variant that had the 85mm gun and entered service in November of 1944 with the Red Army. It did not see combat service in World War II. However, the T-44 as a project was kept secret until, throughout the Cold War until it was deemed completely obsolete. And it never really was the staple of Russian tanks because you have the T-54, which this tank was sort of the stepping stone to get to there in terms of design principles and technology. And you can see a lot of resemblances between the T-44 and the T-54. The hull is very similar. The layout of the hull is very similar. The turret is different, however it's starting to go that way, if that makes any sense. The turret is starting to become a little larger, and the turret armor is also being increased, and the hull armor is being not increased but heavily sloped back, even farther than the T-34, which allows the hull armor to be thinner but still maintain effective thickness, which helps because this is a medium tank. This is supposed to be a very fast, agile, maneuverable tank, and it is, because at 31.8 tons with a 500 horsepower engine at 2,050 RPM, this tank can reach its 49 kilometer per hour top speed pretty quickly and can accelerate very well. If you can keep the RPM in the engine up, you can even at close range circle enemy tanks, which is very hard to do in War Thunder. However, with the T-44 it is possible, because it is light enough and has enough grunt in the engine that you can really if you can keep the RPM up, which is critical, you can circle tanks continuously. I mean, more often than not you don't. You just want to get on their side and plan around through their ammo rack. But it is possible. Maximum inclination, 36 degrees. I think I've said it in every single review. I don't know how much this stat matters. Having a lot of speed going into a hill can affect this number, increase it. So, but there you go, 36 degrees of maximum inclination, how the steepness of the hill it can climb. Turret rotation speed, 15 degrees a second. Not bad. Fairly standard, I feel. It's good enough. Vertical guidance, 5 degrees of gun depression, 28 degrees of elevation. I've always said that I think gun depression is way more important than gun elevation. However, gun elevation is not a bad thing to have. In this case, I would rather it have more gun depression, because 28 degrees is a little excessive. However, 5 degrees of gun depression isn't bad. It's better than what you normally get with some Russian tanks. The heavy tanks generally only have about 3 to 5. Medium tanks, it's about 5. So, it's not bad. It's fairly standard. It's not great, but you can live with it. Now let's talk about the armor. The armor at the front of the hull is 90 millimeters. Okay, well, that's not particularly thick. However, it is sloped back at 62 degrees, meaning straight on, looking directly at this tank. See if I can't line it up just right. There we go. That's good enough. The armor is effectively over 150 millimeters thick. Starting at the base, it's about 150, 145-ish, all the way up to the top where it's about 170 or so. Lower plate is the same thickness as the upper glacis, and it's about 160 to 175-ish. So the upper and lower glacis are basically the same thickness, effectively. The middle of this is pretty good. The middle of this isn't bad. Now, German guns can get through this. 150 millimeters of armor sloped back. That's not that hard to deal with. It does help that it's sloped back at 62 degrees because APCR, for example, from German guns doesn't get great normalization, if at all. So if they're shooting at you with APCR, it may or may not. It may, if you catch it at a weird angle, won't penetrate just because it'll bounce. Just because of the way the shell will be connecting, its percent chance to ricochet off a surface it could penetrate will be greater, because it doesn't have that normalization factor that a lot of AP rounds have. So the two plates here are decent. Not great, but they're okay. Front of the turret, 120 millimeters. Yep, it is 120 millimeters on the front of the turret. Basically from any angle or whatever, 120. You have this sloped up that slopes eventually to the top of the tank, which is very thick. But from the seam here down, I mean, that's not very thick on both sides. I find a lot of times that the turret of the T-44 is its biggest downfall. It has 120 millimeters of armor, but that's all. The sloping really doesn't help it. Because you think about it, even the cheeks here are about 140 to 150. And that's very pennable. And the constructed angle is only 12 degrees. So you're not going to get that same help from the upper glacis and lower glacis where they're constructed at very steep angles. This isn't at all. So I found that the turret is the most vulnerable part of this tank, and more often than not, when a T-44 is rushing me and when I'm in a lumbering German tank, I just shoot it in the face, right in the turret. And more often than not, that's plenty to knock out the tank. You either destroy their gun, kill their gunner, all kinds of bad things will happen. We'll look at the layout in a minute. So, it's the thickest part of the armor, but it's not thick enough. Is basically what I want to get across with that. From the side, 90 on the turret, 75 on the hull. The 75 on the hull is fairly important. Alright? When you're rushing an enemy, which is what the T-44 a lot of times wants to do, because it's at a 6.7 battle rating. So it runs into things like Tiger IIs, Ferdinands, Jagdpanthers, that type of stuff. Well, when you're rushing forward on the enemy, more often than not, you're going to be coming at them like an angle, something like this. Right, this is a fairly good angle of attack for the T-44. By doing this, you can beat their turn radius and be able to get alongside them and plant a shell into their weaker side armor, which is important. Now, at this angle, the upper glacis is between 175 and 200 millimeters thick, increasing to about 215 on the very edges, but more often than not, you won't get hit there. In the dead center, about 190 or so. Alright, lower glacis, they're not going to shoot you here, but it's about 200 millimeters, in excess of 200 millimeters, so that's pretty good. This is approaching 200 millimeters. The side armor, which is 75 millimeters thick, is greater than 200 millimeters. Oops, is greater than 200 millimeters. Everywhere they'll probably be able to hit you, which is right along here. Right, and if they go low, the tracks are more likely to eat the shell. Probably they might blow off the tracks, but it's not the end of the world. You'll get the next shot probably. I guess that's an issue though, but normally your tracks will eat the shell and you can keep going. So when you're angled like this, the whole armor profile you're presenting to the enemy on the hull is about 200 or so millimeters, which is fairly good because all this is very well angled. You see, in shells you have that chance of ricochet just based on the fact that the angle of attack is so weird. But this is where the turret comes in. Right, so if you were pointing straight ahead, the side of the turret is about 140 to 160 or so millimeters in here. It's got this like curving thing, so back here it'll be good, but here it won't be. Right, because you see how it goes like a little sweep here, like a boomerang. Well, this side won't be angled, but this will. So if they hit the back side of the turret, it probably won't be as bad as if they hit the front side of the turret, but still. Return it to the angle right about here, I think I said. Yeah, about there. Front of the turret is the cheeks are now basically 120 because they're unangled. The front of the turret, the mantlet area, is about 140, and obviously this side of the turret is now insanely thick because it's angled heavily. Well, you're probably not going to be facing your turret away from your target. Your turret is most likely to be facing towards them, in which case it's 120 millimeters. It's the obvious choice because it's the thinnest. And when you're rushing forward, a lot of times you're in close proximity with the enemy, and they'll just take advantage of your turret. So the key thing with this tank is I find that when I'm rushing forward onto an enemy, it's a good idea to sometimes just whip the turret, just turn it just a little bit, kind of give it that extra angle for a second, a split second when you think they're about to fire. You got to use little tricks like that, because once you get up alongside an enemy, there's nothing they can do about it. You'll just wreck them, because you have the RPM and the grunt and the engine to keep circling them and keep just damaging them. Now, one really effective strategy with this tank is just to shoot their gun out. You know, take the time, line up a shot. If you can dodge, bounce, whatever their first shot, line up your shot, knock their gun out, or have your first shot knock their gun out, and then you just rush them. You don't have to worry about all this angling and things. Just knock their gun out and rush them. That's a good strategy with this tank, because you want to get in close, but a lot of German guns want to keep you away, and they're very good at that. So that's one strategy. Because of this armor profile, this tank really does prefer the closer in maps. It is difficult to deal with German guns when they can see you coming from 1,000 kilometers away, and they can start shooting you then. They'll probably get 2, 3, maybe even 4 shots in on you before you can close the distance. Now, rear of the tank, you know, it's the rear of the tank. 75 on the turret, 45 on the hull. If you get hit in the rear, I mean, you're toast. So the side armor is good that it's 75 millimeters. It's useful. It's very useful. The front can be useful. All right, let's look at the layout. As with most Russian tanks, it's very, very compact in here. Right? You have the driver sitting down here next to a fuel tank, and a whole buttload of ammo behind the fuel tank. A lot of times, if you're facing straight ahead against an enemy, they'll shoot you right through this part of your upper glacis, because it's not. With an AP round, you're more than likely to penetrate from a German long 88, and it'll hit a fuel tank and it'll hit an ammo rack. Most of the time, that'll do you in. All right, and if it doesn't, the shell can fragment at this point and probably just spray everyone in here, or just keep going and knock out your transmission or your engine or your radiator. If another fuel tank, excuse me, I thought that was a radiator for a second. But you see what I mean. It can just come through here and wreck the tank. Now, I think the turret is very important, because you can look right here. Here's the gunner, right? Behind him is the commander, and in the back of the turret is ammo. All right. More often than not, when you pen the front of the turret, right here, it'll go in here, and the round will fragment and explode. And that sprays the entire crew, will undoubtedly hit ammo, because the ammo is just spread out all over the tank. Alright, so at that point, you're pretty toast. This tank does not like getting hit. It's just too small, too compact, and has too many vital components all in the same area that more often than not, you'll just get blasted. So it's important to keep this, when you're under fire, to keep this thing moving, or be able to use hold down positions to make your tank as small as possible. This tank doesn't have great turret armor on the front. However, it is a very relatively small turret face. So you can use a hold down position to minimize the chance of being hit. If you get hit, you're likely to take a lot of damage, but the idea is to make it less likely that they will hit you. Not that if they hit you, you'll be able to bounce the shot. So that's kind of the layout. It's, let me flash back up. Vital crew members, driver, and the gunner. They're on the right-hand side of the tank if you're looking at it. And there's ammo over here, ammo over here, ammo up here, ammo here, and ammo down over there. And the entire back half of the tank is all flammable things right here. And the whole front part of the tank is basically ammo right here. So being shot in the side is obviously a very unfortunate situation. So that's kind of the armor and the layout of the tank. Let's talk about the gun. The gun is this 85mm gun, the ZIS S53. Now, it's a good gun for dealing with Tigers and, to some degree, Panthers. At this battle ranking that the T-44 is at, I don't particularly like it. And I'll try and explain why. So the base ammunition you get, 115mm penetration at 10 meters, 105 at 500, and 88 at 1500, 54 at 2000. Basically out, this ammunition, in my opinion, isn't effective at 10 meters. It's only effective at on the sides of the tanks. The front of a King Tigers, well, it'll be very difficult for you to penetrate with this shell. right? You basically have to get really lucky at very close range. The second AP choice that you get, it's actually the first AP choice you unlock. 123 millimeters penetration at 10 meters, 111 at 500, 90 at 1500, and 56 at 2000. Okay, so this is a little better. Now you can be at medium range and potentially affect the front of a Tiger II Pease turret. However, Jagdpanthers and Ferdinands and things like that, your best chance is to knock out their gun and close the distance. However, it does get an APCR round. Okay, 185 millimeters of penetration at 10 meters, 140 at 500, 82 at 1500, and 64 at 2000. So the thing about this APCR, it's APCR, which is in itself sometimes a problem because it's a small caliber APCR shell. It's only an 85 millimeter APCR shell. The penetration is what you need to deal with these bigger tanks at the ranges they'll start engaging you at. You need the APCR. However, the APCR can struggle because it's not that big a caliber. Final opinion. And the penetration, quite frankly, isn't that good for dealing with a Tiger IIH, for example, which is only 0.3 battle rating higher. It certainly won't be good enough to deal with a Jagdpanther, who has extremely well-sloped armor. So it's a rough idea. You need to have a fair amount of APCR just to, well, at least some, to kind of harass enemy tanks at range. If you get the side of a tank, you can still knock them out with APCR. However, this AP is more useful in the T-44's role. You want to get up alongside them and blast them, right? Or you want to flanking shots from the side, from weird positions. Well, this shell from the side can penetrate every German tank out to 1500 or so meters. That's pretty good. It's just from the front it struggles. So if you can rush forward to the side of an enemy tank, you have them, because you'll just plant a couple of these or one of these into the side of their tank and they'll be toast. At that range, the APCR is less effective than the AP, because the AP has the penetration it needs, and the shell's damaging effect is much better than the APCR's damaging effect. So you see what I mean, is that this tank wants to get up close and personal. Well, this second AP shell is the shell you want to use to get up close and personal. The APCR is more useful at medium range, where you're still harassing as you're trying to close the distance and get closer to the enemy. Or if you need that long range accuracy, because this shell has 1,030 meters per second muzzle velocity, these only have 792 and 792, right? That's a little unfortunate. HE, I've never fired. You should notice a trend. I generally don't fire HE unless it's a large caliber gun for that tier. 85 is a medium to small caliber gun at this tier. I say medium to small because the Germans have 88 millimeter guns, which are only a little bit larger. However, their 88 millimeter guns are high velocity, high penetration guns. This tank doesn't have that. This gun is more suited for Tigers rather than King Tigers. So, and when you think of it that way, this gun would deal with regular Tigers at decent ranges. The thing is that most of the time it runs into King Tigers, which it'll struggle with. This is kind of, the 85 millimeter gun at this battle rating is very mediocre, in my opinion. Borderline bad, but very mediocre for sure. I do remember a time when this tank was absolutely dominant, but that was when we only had 3 maps in the game, and they were very close quarters maps, and you could just get it, you could just bum rush. And that's what this tank wants to do, but however, with newer maps in the game, it's more difficult to do that. So tanks like the IS-2 have kind of come to the forefront of Russian teams to blast German tanks from those ranges. So that's a look at the overview of the ammo. You need the APCR, but the AP is what you really want to be in a situation to use. Alright. The gun, though, has a great rate of fire. 8.7 seconds per round. and 58 rounds of ammunition. So you won't run out of ammo, and you'll be sending them very quickly. However, like I've said, I don't like this gun at this battle rating. It was much better at the 5.0 battle rating, the 5.7 battle rating, not at the 6.7 battle rating. So it's a little unfortunate because, but I guess if this tank had a, I don't know, 100mm gun or maybe the 122mm gun, it'd be grossly overpowered. Like if we had the 122mm gun variant in the game, I think it would be really, really strong because it has the speed and maneuverability of the T-44 plus the stopping power of an IS-2. That's a very potent combination. So I'm kind of glad we don't have that, but it would make the T-44 as a tank more effective. This tank is a knife-fighting medium against tanks that are very strong long-range snipers. So you need to find creative ways of closing that distance, and hopefully in some of these replays I'll be able to show you what I mean. And without further ado, let's talk about those replays. So here we are in a simulator battle on jungle. And I'm taking, this is my usual strategy for medium tanks where you can't really deal with your opponents from the front. And I am of the opinion I'm not sure the T-44 can. So I prefer to flank around on this southern road and hopefully meet minimal to non-existent resistance, so I can then flank the enemy so I've pushed across the bridge to where the A cap circle normally would be on that hill. And the T-44 is pretty good at this because it's quick, right? I'm moving along here at about 48 kilometers per hour. I'm certainly going to get here before German tanks. So that gives me a distinct advantage because I can get here, hang out, set up, and be able to get the first shot, which is very critical, especially if I can knock out their gun and then just run up and maul them doing medium tank things. But more often than not, I come over here to check to see if anyone's crossing the bridge. And there is actually an enemy tank there. And I take a hit there that knocks out my cannon barrel, which doesn't knock it out but damages it, and that's not good. I need to get out of dodge now. But it sounds like that Tiger II was knocked out by an ally. So I run up over here to where I'm safe, and I'm going to sit down and repair my gun, which is going to take about 30 seconds. I am fortunate that the Tiger II's shell didn't hit the turret either to the right or left, because that might have knocked me out and ended my game very, very quickly. And you have to be careful in the T-44. You have to be very careful not to expose too much of your tank, and realistically I misplayed that. I should have waited next to the hill rather than move around the hill and move into open ground. However, a teammate just ran forward and got knocked out, and there's going to be a Jagdpanther who's going to push around over here and spot me. That's good for me because he's going to be in a position where he has to turn his entire side to where my teammates are coming from, and I can sit behind this ridge and be protected. And there he is. Now I don't have good enough gun depression to reliably be able to go over the hill and get the first shot. He's certainly going to be able to shoot me first, and that's not something I want to do. However, we are going to coax him into shooting first, and as soon as he fires, I'm going to make the decision to push out and get in his face. Well, actually, I just kind of went anyway. Did he fire? He must have fired. Might have just missed it on the replay. My first shot, I was hoping that would do more. He fires a shell and somehow, I think it went off the base of my gun. Somehow it didn't kill me. I think what happened there was it hit the base of the gun and didn't penetrate because of just the way the angle, maybe the shell hit or whatever it was. But a teammate knocks him out. But you notice right before he was knocked out, I tried to shoot his gun out just to be assured that he wouldn't get another shot. And here's a Tiger II-P. From the side, he only has 80 millimeters of armor, so That's a pretty reliable shot for the T-44. And now we're in the situation where the T-44 really excels. When the battle on one flank is broken down into a series of events where you can come at them and at the enemy in weird directions, and it's just more chaos than organization, or there's no real battle line anymore. So I'm running around over here. There's going to be another Jagdpanther off to my left who probably didn't know I was here, but we're certainly going to spread the good news to our friend in the unturreted tank destroyer. And in rank 4, this is the situation your team, the Russian team, wants to get into. It wants to break that initial sniping line that the Germans are undoubtedly going to set up, and then have their faster tanks push around and wreak havoc in the back of in those sniping positions. I got a little unfortunate with the first shot. It was just poorly aimed on my part. I should have hit the upper casement, not the skirts on the side. However, the second shot goes clean through the casement and knocks out the tank. Now there is a Tiger 2P over here in one of these shell craters. And we're going to see him a little later, and it's going to be an unfortunate situation for my T-44, and it's going to be slightly amusing. The end of the replay is amusing, so it kind of highlights that I make plenty of mistakes just like everyone else. I'm not a particularly good player, but I'm okay. I'm okay at the game. But at this point, we've cleaned out their southern spawn. It's unlikely they're going to get any more tanks because this is a simulator, so you get the number of spawns your vehicle gets. We've knocked out 2 Jagdpanthers and a Tiger 2. None of those get a second spawn. So, feeling pretty good. Running over here, the Panther was over there, but he gets blasted by an Su-100. So this part of the map seems to be fairly secure. Now there is a Tiger 2P over here sitting in the ditch. He's going to be in a shell crater, and I'm going to use my speed to hope to rush forward unexpectedly and try and insert my gun into his engine compartment. Now, an unfortunate thing's going to happen. I think you'll understand what I mean. So I'm coming up over here, and I spot him right there, dead ahead, in the little ditch. I thought about stopping and shooting him from there, and that would have been the better choice based on what happens. I come over and I shoot him. He's on fire. Oh God. He's turning the gun, and bam. Puts it right through my tank. It was unfortunate. See, it penetrated the front of the mantlet, and the shell just exploded and killed everybody. Very unfortunate, very sad. However, now his turret is facing the wrong way. We have allied tanks moving in on him, and he does get knocked out. Because that's kind of what happens when you turn your turret away from threats. I was sort of hoping that he wouldn't turn the turret just because there's more dangerous guns to his front. However, he just turned the turret and dealt with me. But then undoubtedly when he was turning his turret back, an ally just put a shell through him. And this is a public service announcement, this next part of the video. I've seen countless people do it, and I told myself I never would. But I'm going to try and go down this slope, right? It's not that hard. There's water at the bottom. I'll just be able to drive out. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Nope. Nope, 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 nope. Bad idea. Very bad idea. Whee! Yeah. I drowned my tank. Pretty fantastic, I know, right? So, other than that, all enemy tanks have been knocked out. So, even though I drowned, it wasn't the end of the world. And we're going to win the game. So, I guess it worked out. What did we learn from that review? Or this, not the review, the replay. You want to get into the situation where the combat is broken down into just sort of organized chaos where you know who your allies are and you know who the enemies are. However, you're coming at everyone at weird angles and things like that. That's where the T-44 really shines. So let's move on to the next replay. Here we are in a realistic battle on God, I just about called this map Kuban and Karelia. No, it's Ash Valley, or Ash River, whichever one it is. I can never remember what the second word is. It's either Ash Valley or Ash River. I'm pretty sure it's Ash Valley. I've taken the southern spawn, because that's just my usual practice, I guess. And I'm going to be coming over here with another T-44. And hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate a little bit of the shortcomings, but also the interesting aspects of this gun. This 85mm gun has a great rate of fire, which is outstanding. Rate of fire is important. However, it lacks punch and, I guess, penetrating power, because the shell isn't that big. A 122mm shell has the ability to penetrate just about every tank in the game, just because of how large the shell is and how much kinetic energy you can package into that shell. How much good news, you could say. But there's a Tiger moving around, and my first shot hits the cheek of his turret, angled, very unfortunate. Usually you can penetrate the front of the mantlet of a Tiger, however, not like that. However, there's another Tiger coming around, and you'll notice that I ran into a lot of Tigers this game, which is nice. But I didn't do anything to him. But his return shot didn't do anything to me. So now we have this Tiger right here, and his front plate is very pennable for my tank. I can handle a Tiger's front plate. And the Tiger is the tank that this machine can deal with. I have good enough armor. I mean, he was showing me his side, and from the side I can penetrate every tank in the game, excluding probably the IS-4. Now that Tiger has a strong sniping position. However, he's not going to get to shoot at us again because we're fast enough to get under his gun depression, get under that rock, and basically never allow him to shoot us again. But at this point we've cleaned up, I believe, 3 Tigers. 3 Tigers I think are dead, which is nice. Now we just got to shoot some of the AI and move forward and push through their spawn, because T-44 is not particularly good as a sniping tank. It has good rate of fire and good penetration for the side of tanks. However, if they turn your gun on you, that might be an issue. So rather than sit on this ridge and try and snipe, myself and this other T-44, my randomly selected teammate, are going to push forward and try and sweep around and kill everybody. And again, we're at that situation of the battle where it's sort of broken down and we have complete control because we have the fast, agile, knife-fighting tanks in a situation where fast, agile, knife-fighting tanks are going to do well. We've eliminated that other Tiger now, so that's 4, if I've counted right, that's 4 enemy players who likely are not going to respawn. Because, I mean, they'd have to have earned enough points to get their second vehicle, and they very well could have, so moving through the spawn isn't the best idea. And we both kind of spin out coming down this hill. That hill is still an issue for just about every tank. But based on the fact we haven't spotted anyone yet, the enemy must be in the northern part of the map, or they moved through the middle of the map and just didn't run into anybody, which is entirely possible. I've noticed that on Ash Valley, you either find everyone in the beginning, or they've gone to the other side of the map, or they're in the middle and no one's ever spotted them. Now I'm not sure, because I haven't looked at it, but I'm not sure this guy can kill me. He might be able to from the side. I do kind of make mincemeat of trying to kill him, that's for sure. I think the only thing he could really do to me is damage my gun. But I am definitely trying to keep my side armor protected and angled. And I think I would have been able to do it, but my teammate comes and cleans him up, and that's more important, because now there's no chance he can knock me out because he's not alive anymore. At this point, our teammates have pushed through from our northern spawn all the way to their northern spawn, so I know the enemy's not here. But there is another enemy out there, and he is capturing our base. Whoa, plot twist. How did he get there? I'm suspecting what happened was he just went through the middle of the map undetected and got to our base, which, I don't know. Honestly, I'm not sure I would have gone to our cap, because you think about it, now we all know where he is. A little unfortunate. We're going to have an IS-2 come back. And I think it'll be me and the IS-2 to deal with this Tiger. I believe it's just a normal Tiger. Tiger H1. And at this point in the battle, the T-44 excels hunting down the enemy because it's fast, it has a good gun, it's when you surprise someone, the armor is good enough. If they get a long time to aim the shot and really think about where they want to hit you, it's less good, bordering on bad. I mean, as you saw in the last replay, the mantle of this gun isn't superbly thick. Now, that was at close range, and his gun was basically sticking out the backside of my tank, practically. However, that's indicative of, it's not indicative of performance at most ranges. However, from experience, I can say it is indicative of performance at most ranges. The turret, the front of the turret of this tank generally won't save you. Now, our IS-2 has found the Tiger, and he's going to start shooting him. Now, he doesn't knock him out, which, quite frankly, I think the IS-2 must have just gotten unlucky. Because usually an IS-2 can deal with a Tiger 1 fairly quickly. But to the same respect, the IS-2 got lucky that the Tiger didn't deal with him. Because Tiger certainly can. But he's the last tank, so I'm YOLOing a little bit. I'm going to flop over this hill. I thought about firing in midair, but then I was just like, nope. Let's just aim the shot, put it right through the crew compartment. Bam. Last guy's dead. I think it was the last guy. Just make sure he knows that, yeah, I got you this time. Spreading the good news. 185mm shell at a time. But now the enemy's lost all their tanks. Yep. And we're going to win this game. And continue to spread the good news with all 85mm of news. But this game was another good representation, I think, of how the T-44 excels as more of that knife-fighting medium. It's not like the Panthers, who are more focused on long-range sniping and things like that and have the armor to be a long-range sniper. This tank has the armor to be a long-range sniper, maybe, but it just doesn't have the gun. It has the gun of a close knife-fighting medium, which is the way you should play this tank. So, alright, so opinion time. What do I think of the T-44? I like it as a close knife-fighting medium. In a situation where I'm driving the T-44 and I have to deal with German tanks in excess of 500 meters, I'm a little sad. Alright, and that's not to say that this tank is a bad tank, because for what it's meant to do currently in the game, it's great at it. It has a fast-firing gun, has enough punch to deal with the sides of German tanks. The issue it has is this 85mm gun just isn't kind of cut out for a 6.7 battle rating. Right? You think about the tanks that have a 6.7 battle rating. Alright, let's bring them up. Let's bring them up. Alright, 6.7 battle rating, which is what the T-44 is at. SU-100, 100mm gun. Lots and lots of... No, I'm not going to test drive it. Let's look at 190 at 10 meters. I should be using this ammunition. Should have had that selected. I think when I play I have that set up. But you see what I mean? This gun has more penetration at 1,000 meters than the T-44 has at close range. Okay. SU-122P, another 6.7 battle rating tank, has more penetration at 500 meters than the T-44 has at all ranges. Now, that's a 100mm gun and a 122mm gun. Let's look at this tank, T-34-85. Alright, it has, the same gun, the same penetration, and it's at battle rating 5.0. Alright, so this is basically a battle rating 5.0 gun. However, it does get APCR, and the APCR does help out. However, the APCR doesn't do enough. Alright. I don't think the T-44 does very well currently. Now, on The maps where you can flank and you can stay concealed and kind of break the battle down into organized chaos, this tank excels, and you can definitely have success in this tank. It is not a bad tank. I think it's an average tank. It doesn't have the armor. I don't think is good enough to deal with German guns at range, and it's certainly not good enough at close range. It is laid out effectively so that when you're charging the enemy, you can bounce their shot. And if you do, more often than not, you can get close enough to shoot them in the side or use your engine power to circle them or things like that. So I think it's an average tank. I don't think it's above average. I don't think it's below average. I think it's average. And it's entirely to do with the gun. The armor of the tank, I think, does deserve a 6.0 to 6.7 battle rating, anywhere in there, because it does have effective armor when angled. The gun, though, really holds this tank back, and that's why I think it's kind of a shell shock when maybe a newer player goes from seeing T-44s as primarily, in terms of medium tanks, to seeing T-54s. T-54 has a great gun. T-44 has a mediocre gun. But the thing is, in tank games, I feel like if you have a good gun, we can make it work. If you don't have a good gun, you need something else. You need to be insanely quick or have insanely good armor to the point where you can get to the ranges where your gun is effective and stand a fighting chance. The T-44 is quick. Alright, so it ticks that category. That's why I think it's an average tank, not an above average tank, not a below average tank. If it was not as fast as it is, I would call it a below average tank, but it does have the speed to make that gun work. Alright, you do have to work a little hard, though. You're going to have to work harder than you did with T-34s, because you're not outright going to be able to penetrate the front of the enemy tank at normal combat ranges. You might have to close a distance, especially now that at rank 4, German tanks have sloped front armor and thick, and the armor that is flat is generally thick, like on the Tiger 2H. Think about it, the Tiger 2H is 0.3 higher than the T-44, and it has a 180mm thick frontal turret face. You only can penetrate that with APCR in and around 10 meters. Alright, that's not good. You have no hope of penetrating the upper glacis or lower plate. So, yeah, this tank is required to flank just because the gun won't allow it to engage targets from the front. Now, in the realistic battle, you saw that myself and another T-44 were able to stand toe-to-toe with Tigers and bounce their shots, but that's because it's a different gun. It's not the longer 88mm gun. It's the first 88mm gun we get introduced to, which is a very good gun. However, the Tigers weren't able to use it. They weren't able to penetrate the front of our turret, and we were able to penetrate their front plates and the side of their armor at the standard combat ranges that we were at, which was approximately, well, one Tiger was at less than 100 meters. The other one was probably around 200 to 300 meters, or somewhere in that ballpark. I'd have to go back and look at the replay to see exactly how far away they were, but the point is that when you take that step up to the 6.7 battle rating, you start encountering much more effective armor schemes. And the T-44, I don't think, has the gun to necessarily deal with those effective armor schemes unless you can use the speed to get around the side and engage those targets from the side, because it does have the penetration to damage and destroy enemy tanks from the side. So that's kind of my long-winded opinion about this tank. I think it's average. I don't think it's going to... Usually T-44s aren't going to be what wins you the game. More often than not, it's going to be the IS-2s and the Su-100s of the world, where they knock out the enemy tanks and then allow T-44s to just spread chaos amongst the enemy. And that's where the T-44 excels, is hunting down enemies, getting on the flanks and just breaking down the enemy resistance, because now they're being attacked from multiple sides they have to choose. And a lot of times when you have to choose who you eliminate, the target you didn't choose, more often than not, has a very good chance of eliminating you. So my advice, if you're researching this or have unlocked it or trying to play it to get that T-44, play this like a flanking medium. Try your best to get on the edge. Try your best to put yourself in a position where this gun will give you success. Don't try and engage Tiger 2s and Panthers at medium to long range from the front. It's just not going to end well. If you have to do that, you're left with no other option. Try and hit their gun, knock out their gun, and close the distance, or wait for backup. If you're in a 2v1 situation, knock out guns, and if they're at close range, flank. Use one as cover from the other to knock them out, and then knock the other person out. Or if it's at longer ranges, try and knock out their gun, keep in cover as much as possible, wait for backup, or find an alternate route to flank them. On Kursk, I think the T-44 is actually decently effective because if you can run along the bottom side of the ridge, I have been able to do it successfully, you can flank their whole position and cause some real havoc. However, that requires the enemy not to send anyone into the field, the western field, which they may do. So yeah, T-44 I think is average. It's not great in my opinion. However, it does do one job really well. It's just that one job requires a little more thinking, a little more, what's the word for it? Strategy on your part rather than the enemy's part. So I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I've been Corny Swiss, and I'll see you next time.